Well, hello and welcome everyone to What It Takes to Be an Ethical Trip Sitter. My name is Susyn Renee. I am the manager of client relations here at Being True to You. I'm also one of our certified coaches and instructors here with the company. And I am joined today by Sarah Howat, a certified Being True to You coach and expert trip sitter. And she is also our lead instructor for our Psychedelic Trip Sitters training program. Welcome, Sarah.
Hi. Hi, everyone.
So, we are just so excited to talk with you today, Sarah, and all your expertise about what it takes to be an ethical trip sitter. Today, we're going to be covering for you the core principles of being an ethical sitter, how to handle ethical dilemmas that may come up, the importance of informed consent and boundaries, and also building trust and rapport, and a whole lot more. We're also going to cover why it's important to be trained as a trip sitter. And if you decide to pursue this path, what your options are to get that training. And of course, as we always love to do, we're going to leave plenty of time at the end for all of you to get your questions answered to anything that may be coming up as we move through the webinar today. But before we dive in, I want you to know who we are and why we're bringing this amazing webinar to you. So let me quickly introduce Being True to You as a company, and then I'll hand it over to Sarah to introduce herself and to get us started. So Being True to You was founded by Deanne Adamson, and she started the company in 2010 after leaving her career as a mental health counselor. She started then providing aftercare in recovery coaching for ibogaine detox centers, which really grew into providing preparation and integration coaching along with sitting for all kinds of psychedelic and addiction treatment centers. After 3 years of providing these services, Deanne in 2013 created our very first edition of our signature coach training program. And 11 years later, we're in our fifth edition of our coach training. We've trained thousands of coaches in our program throughout the last 11 years. And we've really been asked over these years for more training for psychedelic trip sitters. So while we have behind the scenes been training our clinics and different retreat centers on trip sitting, just this year we launched our psychedelic trip sitters training to the public in collaboration with our expert here today, Sarah Howat. So we are just so excited about this partnership. We're so excited to have Sarah's expertise in psychedelic trip sitting. And Sarah is actually the author of our psychedelic trip sitters course. So I'll let Sarah now share a little bit more about herself, just so you all know how credentialed she is in helping you all learn more today about what it takes to be a psychedelic and ethical trip sitter. Sarah, take it away.
Thanks, Susan. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah, and I'm going to start out just by talking a little bit about how I got here and a little bit about my story. Um, I was in my 20s and I was working at a retirement company selling mutual funds. And I realized that that's not what I was here to be doing. And I took a leap and I went back to grad school to become a therapist. My mom used to always say life happens when you're busy making plans, and I have found that to be true. And um, I was almost through my grad school program. I had one class to go, and my husband at the time said, I want to open a craft brewery. It was kind of during that boom, craft beer boom. And so I dropped out of grad school with one class to go and started this company. And again, life happens when you're busy making plans, and we got divorced. And in that divorce, I sold the shares of my company back. And I had been working with psychedelics just on my own around that same time. And I thought, well, I don't really want to go back and get my master's, but I do want to help people and I do want to be in service. The first time I ever took mushrooms, I had a profound experience that I'm sure many of you have had, which is, wow, this really is like 10 years worth of therapy in one night. And so with that, I started my journey. Actually, the first step for me was doing the Being True to You coaches program. That was really where this all started, really taking shape for me. Started training under some facilitators of Bufo and worked in some other spaces, some other guided spaces as a sitter. And then about, I don't know, a couple years into just helping out and being of service where I could be of service, I got a call from a friend, kind of unexpected, actually. She said, I have some friends starting a company, a trip sitting network called Psychedelic Passage, and I think you'd be a good fit. And they hired me. And in about 1 year's time, I worked with close to 100 people, in about a year and a half, I'm sorry. Now I work for 3 different retreat companies, working with indigenous lineages as well as more luxury retreats. And I do private sitting and coaching. And yeah, just deepening into that realm with these different allies and medicines. As a private sitter, I work 100% legally to the fullest extent that I'm able. And that is one of the primary targets of this course, is to teach you how to sit ethically and legally for folks. And a part of that is, safe sourcing and harm reduction. It is, not, I don't provide the medicine for my clients. And we'll talk about that more in the course, what that looks like in working with folks. But you have to know how to play the game, and we've got to work within the boundaries that we have set. And so that's one of the primary focuses of this course, is to give you the tools that you need to ensure safety and legality, and to practice ethically, to be a sitter of integrity, which is something that I talk about a lot in the course, how to be a sitter of integrity. And what that really means is, being an integrated person, right? Not perfect, not completely healed, but integrated. You're doing your own work. And that is another focus of this course. Each module has homework and also what I call soul work, which is essentially shadow work and getting into the self. And, I'll ask a lot of questions about blind spots and your strengths and your weaknesses and places where you can improve your life. Because in order to be a sitter of integrity and to practice ethically and legally, you have to know about yourself. You have to know where you struggle. Like for me, people pleasing, right? I struggle with people pleasing. I know that about myself. And because I know that about myself, I'm able to watch for when that shows up and make choices in alignment and in integrity, regardless of some wound that I may have around people pleasing. So again, just one example of many. There's no substitute for experience, and that's another thing that you'll get tired of hearing me say throughout the 12 weeks that we spend together. There really is no substitute for experience, but this course provides a framework and a foundation to build on. And I just want to give a little example here. I hosted a retreat this last week to train other sitters in an experiential way. And the number of horror stories I heard from the people in attendance of bad experiences they had had under the guidance of a sitter was in some cases quite appalling to me, to be honest. Some horrific stories of sitters that were, for instance, shaming someone in the middle of a ceremony, out loud with the other participants present. Just things like that. And I'm not saying that anybody on this call would dare to do something like that. However, if you don't know what is normal and what is, what it means to be in integrity and to practice ethically and legally, you might go and have an experience like that and say, oh, it's okay. I don't see what's wrong with that. Right. So this provides a framework and a foundation so that whether you're working with someone else or at a retreat or a clinic, you'll know, okay, that's not right, or that's not, in alignment and in integrity. So it allows you to also understand and know what to look for when you're getting a job or working with a mentor or something like that. A couple other things here. You have to have the skills, and we talk a lot about essence, how to cultivate your essence and the things that you're already good at and that you already do naturally, and the things that you feel passionate about, and how to incorporate those and integrate those. to have the skills to know how to deal with clients in all kinds of situations. And a lot of the time in discussions that we spend together, we do go over the material, but we really just talk about different experiences and scenarios that I've seen and that other people have witnessed. And we really, um, you know, open up the onion, right? Peel back the layers of the onion. We talk about the foundation and what I call the three pillars of a good journey. Trust being the foundation. We'll talk a lot about how to build trust, which is part of integrity, and curiosity, how to cultivate curiosity, both within ourselves and with our clients. Courage is another one, and compassion. So we'll talk about those in depth. And we talk a lot about how to assess your clients for readiness, right? And that's another part of being an ethical sitter. How do you know when a client's really ready? How do you know when they are capable of integrating change into their lives? Or maybe it's not the right time and they don't have the space due to family obligations or something else. So other aspects of harm reduction, that's just one aspect, assessing for readiness. But we'll talk about contraindications and red flags to look out for and all those things to make sure that you're sitting for folks who are able to navigate this experience, acting as, the bumpers in the bowling alley, right? To make sure everything stays contained and holding that space. And then finally, community. I would say that a lot of the people in the last cohort, and I know Susyn would agree with me, we had a great cohort in the spring, and that community is going to be invaluable. Being able to bounce ideas off of one another, and somebody may be really familiar with veterans work, and someone else may be really familiar with ketamine clinics or whatever, more of the indigenous side of things, whatever it may be, but that community is really invaluable. I had a great friend and teacher say to me, we're all students and we're all teachers. We all have something to teach and we all have something to learn. And so this will really cultivate both a student and a teacher to this work. Thanks, Susyn.
Thank you for that, Sarah. Yeah, what a beautiful overview of just a lot of those core principles that it really does take to be an ethical trip sitter. I know we talk about so much how important it is to bring integrity into this space, and everything you shared there just really, is the foundation of all of it. So for everyone here, when we're thinking about what it takes to be an ethical trip sitter, I'm wondering, can you share like a real life example? Because I know you have a lot, where these ethical considerations really made like a significant difference in the outcome of a psychedelic journey that you are supporting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm actually going to switch it up from the story I was going to tell. I'm going to tell a situation about a time when I didn't do it right. So when I was first starting this work, I sat for my roommate's mother and her aunt, so her mother's sister. The mother I had no concerns about, but the sister, there were several what I call yellow flags. They weren't like major red flags, but there were many yellow flags. And I was inexperienced. I hadn't done a lot of this work. And so I took her on as a client. And she ended up being one of my top 5 most difficult client experiences. She tried to grab her keys and go home, just could not surrender, could not go into the experience, and kind of fought the whole way through. Um, Luckily, I had a mentor that I could text really quick and say, what do I do? And she really gave me some good feedback on how to handle that. Which is something that I'll share more, throughout the course, like how do you handle a situation like that? But I should have been more, I should have listened to my intuition, and not taken on that client. I should have listened to the yellow flags that were kind of stacking up to create one big red flag. So yeah, that was a time when I did not do it right.
Yeah, and I'm sure you still had a good outcome,
Yeah.
based on
Yeah.
everything, right? And yeah, it's amazing how much intuition does play a role in this, and really
Yeah.
can guide us. But yeah, thanks for sharing, on a way when it maybe didn't work so well, because those things happen in this space. And I think it's important again that we're skilled up and we learn how to navigate these situations. So with that, like maybe you can just give us like a little bit here on like how should a trip sitter handle situations where they're facing like an ethical dilemma or one of these unexpected challenges during a session?
Yeah. Well, I just want to go back for a moment before I give an example of the importance of knowledge um, we can learn here, but we have to end up embodying it here, which is where that experience comes in. But knowing it here is the first step, right? Like when we go into these experiences, I wish I could see your faces and your hands, but when we go into these experiences, how many times do we have a sudden awareness of something that we didn't know before? And that unravels the threads for healing, right? Is having that first like aha moment of awareness. Well, it's the same thing here. This is the first step in really providing the foundation so that you can become embodied in this work. Um, I have some clients right now that um, they there were a set of they've been planning this for a few months, that everything's been paid for, they're ready to go. They were supposed to have their experience this weekend. It's a family of three, a husband and wife and a son. And they were supposed to have their experience this weekend, but just through some situational things, and they didn't get prep done in time, and they didn't get what they needed for the ceremony. And so it's just, everything's just rushed, right? And I had to have a very honest conversation with them about timing and what it means to really prepare for this experience, and that it's not like Western medicine where you can just take something and it's going to be already all solved and fixed and figured out. And that it really is about preparing in all aspects to really have this experience, and also trusting that when the timing's right, it will happen. And if I would be, if I had no boundaries, or if I wasn't concerned with safety, or, oh, well, I'm a people pleaser and I don't want to say no, and so we're just going to do it anyways, that might lead to a negative outcome, right? It might be actual harm done. And so I had to have an honest conversation and set that boundary and say, this isn't the right time. Like, do you agree? And if not, let's talk about that. But they did ultimately agree that it wasn't the right time. So we're postponing that session. But it's so important to be aware of your blind spots. And that's why I come back to knowledge, because this course will not only provide the foundation and the framework, but you will be doing some deep work as well, which will help you know yourself so that you don't fall into these pitfalls of having experiences that are less than ideal or ineffective.
Yeah, thank you for that, Sarah. And yeah, so important. Like knowledge is a big part of it. And I think you say a lot, you don't know until you know, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the experience really does come in. So, I want to shift over and talk about consent a little bit, because I think it's a really big piece of what it does take to be an ethical trip sitter. So when we think about the role of consent in ethical trip sitting, how can trip sitters really ensure that they're honoring like a client's autonomy throughout the experience or the journey?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a big focus in this course on what I call heart-centered harm reduction. So heart-centered being that place of service and love, but also non-attachment to the client's journey, right? Because that's an ego attachment if we're attached to the client's journey. It's not about us, right? It's about the client. Consent is everything. And I'm a big believer that when it comes to knowledge, it's better to give the client more information so that they can make an informed decision for themselves. And that protects you, not completely. There's always going to be risk in this work, but it protects you more if you have the proper informed consent, client agreements, um, educating clients on contraindications, dangers, risks, strengths, limitations of this experience, talking about, expectations and not having expectations, all those sorts of things go into consent. Also dosage, I don't prescribe my clients a dose. Now this is going to shift or differ depending on what setting you're in, all those sorts of things. But in my one-on-one work with clients, I do not tell them what to do. I only act as a buffer and a bumper should they go into dangerous territory, right? And so I'm guiding them and educating them on what to expect and what dose of the medicine may be too high for them, et cetera, things like that. So it's all part of consent. And really, we want to be putting the power in the client's hands as much as possible, obviously within the realm of what is safe to do. Boundaries are a really important part of consent as well, letting clients know what is allowed and not allowed in the ceremony, or the rules of the session, and really giving them a full picture understanding as much as possible of what they're about to embark on. I love the quote from Brene Brown, kindness is clarity. So being really clear with boundaries and consent, asking yes or no, do you give me permission to touch you during the session? All those things are so important, and we go into all of that in so much detail in this course.
Yeah, thank you for that, Sarah. I think, yeah, the boundaries, the consent, so important to keep ethical as a trip sitter and to make sure your clients are getting the most out of their experience and in a safe way as well.
Mhm.
So, another big piece I think that's important is talking about trust and rapport. Such a big piece of integrity. And so, how can an aspiring trip sitter like build trust and rapport with their clients while also, again, maintaining like this professionalism and like the ethical boundaries that we're talking about?
Mhm. Well, I think there's one big rule here, and that is just be honest. Be honest with your clients, be honest about your experience, be honest about even things that come up for you. I had this situation with these clients that was supposed to happen this weekend, just in a couple of days. When I talked to the wife the first night, I had just gotten home from that retreat. I was exhausted, but it felt urgent, and so I got on the call, and I felt like I handled that with a little bit of shortness. And so when we spoke a couple days later, I said, I just want to tell you if I came across as short, I'm sorry. I had just come off this retreat. And she said, no, 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 I understand, but thank you. That is all part of building trust and rapport. You're being honest about how you're showing up, and also, telling the truth about what the limitations of these experiences are, what your role is, what you do and do not do, being honest about, I'm not a licensed doctor, I'm not a licensed therapist, or if you are, that's okay to say, but being really honest about um, everything related to your experience and the potential outcomes, dangers, and all of that related to this work. Um, I remind my clients often that this is not a silver bullet and that the ceremony is only one small part of this journey called life, and that integration is lifelong. And that is also part of, building that trust and rapport so that, if they do come out of a session and they go, I have no idea what just happened and I don't know what to do with it, you can still um, you can still be honest with them along the way and let them know, hey, this might happen. This is a potential outcome, and what do we do if that's the case? How do we reorient and anchor back to our intention and to trust and curiosity and courage and compassion and all of those things? Um, yeah, so just being really honest and truthful, I think, is the best way to show that you are someone of integrity, a sitter of integrity, and to honor your clients and build that trust with them.
Mm. Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, beautifully said there. So I think this next question I have for you will be of particular interest to folks. I think this is a juicy one. So when I think about ethical trip sitting, what are some common misconceptions out there about, operating in an ethical way as a trip sitter? And maybe more importantly in this question, like how can new practitioners, people like getting into this space, avoid these pitfalls?
Yeah. So the first one is it's trip sitting, not trip standing. So so you will sit a lot, and this isn't a performance, right? You're not performing for anyone. Get ready to be really bored, and that's okay. It's okay if you have a journey where nothing much happens at all for you. There's a lot happening for the client. So for this one, I just wrote down a few to-dos. And the first one is cultivate stillness and beingness. So really cultivating a sense of peace, focus. If you have a regular meditation or breath practice, just learning to just be and be still is the first one. Cultivate stillness and beingness. Next up, you are a flight attendant, not a shaman. So practicing your role as heart-centered harm reduction specialist. You're in the industry of hospitality and service and care. And you are there to provide a safe space and to provide a sense of safety. And so focusing on that as your primary role and not, if you want to practice Reiki or something like if that's part of your practice, asking the client, putting them in charge. Would you like this as a part of your ceremony? So the to-do on that one is cultivate a balance of confidence and humility, being both the student and the teacher. The next one is one of my favorite quotes, and I don't remember who said it, but it's something to the effect of, a good artist knows best what to subtract, not what to add. So less is more, like way, way less than you think. um, it's interesting watching, new sitters, like at this training retreat we did, watching new sitters, as many times as we said less is more, there's still this like sense of eagerness and like I have to do the bells and the chimes and the drum and the sage and the right. It's like just constantly something to do with, and just practice letting go of all that, what you think needs to happen, and really cultivating deep presence and deep listening. This is a process of listening over talking. We're not projecting outward. We're listening to what's necessary in the space based on nonverbal feedback, verbal feedback, whatever it may be. And the last one is your ability to integrate yourself is imperative to this work. It's not maybe I should, it's absolutely necessary to this work. If you have a lot of leaky energy in your life, you're going to come to these sessions with that same leaky energy. And if you're cranky all the time, this client's going to sense that, or um, if you have low blood sugar and you don't eat, right? Like all of these things are so important to this work. And just knowing yourself, knowing your weak spots and being courageous enough to look at those. It's not about perfection, but it is about your attention and your care to yourself, being able to go within and do the work yourself. And then the to do there is cultivate your essence through integration and embodiment. So continuing to do your deep work and making that a part of your career or your job or whatever you want to call it, like making that a part of it. I want to tell a quick story. I wanted to mention this earlier, but I lost it. So the entire reason I started this course, or even made the proposal to Being True to You for this course, is that I had a client through Psychedelic Passage that before she had ever even done one journey, she said, "How do I do what you do?" And I said, "Well, first you do the journey, then maybe another one, and then maybe another one. Whether it's with me or somebody else, doesn't matter. You just do the work. And then come back and let's talk." And she said, "Well, what's the next step I can take?" So I sent her to the Being True to You coaches training, and she did it. And she said it was the most transformational experience of her life. And then she said, "But when's the course on how to be a trip sitter?" And that was the reason that I even developed this, is because I sensed her eagerness, but there was no pathway for her to get there. And I've been the eager one that's like, I'm just okay, I'm ready, I'm ready, I'm ready. But I didn't have the experience and I didn't have the knowledge. And it was through um, courses like this that really helped me to understand the importance of the deep work, understand the importance of the knowledge, and then finding a mentor, someone to help put it into practice, is kind of the last and final step. So, yeah, I'll leave it there. Back to you, Susyn.
Yeah, I know. Thank you, Sarah. So much great stuff there. And I'm glad that that story came in for like how the course creation came to be. Like, I think that's just so exciting to share that that client's eagerness like really gave you the momentum to create all the magic that you did with the course. And I love what you were saying too about like, the ability to integrate ourselves and like work on our own essence. Like as sitters, as coaches, we got to show up and do our own work, and
Mhm.
I think that does get overlooked sometimes. So I'm glad you brought that in for us today. So again, lots of great information shared, and it really does, feel like, and we know, right, there are just so many factors to consider when someone wants to not only be like a psychedelic trip sitter, but an ethical one, right, and operate with integrity in this space. So we've covered some of this already, but I'm going to ask this to you in a pointed way. I'd love your answer to like, why does someone need training to be a trip sitter?
Yeah, there's so much that we could talk about in relation to that, but in terms of like these types of trainings, these courses, um, you can find, you could go find somebody to mentor you and just do that work and you would learn over time, right? Um, But I will tell you that time spent learning about some techniques and case studies and discussions. I mean, even thinking back on my time in grad school, learning to be a therapist, all of that, while it was just, book knowledge essentially, gave me the confidence to actually step into my work. So when I started coaching people, I already had the confidence because I already had the skills and the knowledge from those years of training. Um, this is way more than just like a step-by-step guide. We are going to talk about real life examples. We are going to talk about things that I've made, mistakes that I've made, right? We're going to talk about shadow work. We're going to talk about all of those things. So it is as much a self-development course as it is a training, really. And because self-development, personal development, spiritual development, because all of that is so imperative to this work, it only makes sense that we would marry them. And we got a lot of great feedback actually on the homework. I wasn't sure what to expect with that first cohort, but a lot of people said, this was just as valuable as the course, and the discussions and all of that. So I'm an open book. I'll answer any question that anybody ever has. I mean, boundaries, but you know, I'm a pretty transparent person, and I'll share with you times when I didn't get it right, and times when it went really well and what contributed to that. So.
Yeah, thank you for that, Sarah. And yeah, speaking of questions, we're not quite there yet, but we will move to Q&A shortly for all of you attending. So as questions are coming up with everything Sarah is sharing, if you do want to know more, we do want to make sure you get your questions answered. So there's a Q&A section here in the webinar. Drop your questions in there. We'll be getting to them shortly. But I think one more thing for you, Sarah, this might be kind of a multi-part question, but I think you can wrap it all up into one. Like, as everyone here is attending, I'm wondering kind of two things. Like, can you tell us some reasons why someone would not only want to be trained as a trip sitter, but why you feel too, from what you've seen, like why this space does need more integrity in it and why it does need more training?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing I want to share is that there really is no normal in this industry, right? Every journey that a client has is going to be vastly different from the next. And you're going to face situations with clients where you say, like, that's above my pay grade. I don't know what to do with this one. But because of the confidence and the skills that you'll learn in this course and the work that you'll do on yourself and the contemplation of some of your places of wounding, all of that will allow you to practice in those unexpected moments, right? Because this is a practice. It's just why they call medicine a practice, right? It's never going to be perfect. You're practicing every time. But it'll give you the confidence to know how to handle those situations with much more what I call finesse, right? Finesse is an art form. It's a balancing act. And having other people to reach out to and say, hey, what do you think about this? Or I have this client that's got this Medicaid, whatever it is, how do I deal with this situation? And maybe even in the moment, like I had to do with that one client, right? So there is no normal. It's important to have the tools in the tool belt so that you can at least apply that if and when it should arise.
Thank you for that. And yeah, I think you say a lot. There is no normal, and there really isn't. Just like in our own personal journeys, like there's no one normal journey. They're all unique. They're all different. None of it's normal, right? And so, yeah, I feel like it's just so important. The more we can do to be prepared, right, for all of
Mhm.
that and train. So, yeah, this has all been so great, Sarah. And I feel like, our folks here with us today have just gained so much more awareness from you on just what it does take to be an ethical trip sitter. I know, of course, as you've mentioned, as we've gone through, we do offer our psychedelic trip sitters training here at Being True to You. It is a course that you created and authored, Sarah. And so could you just, before we move into Q&A, can you just share like a few just super quick highlights for everyone regarding the course that you did create for us and how you structured it?
Yeah, so the course is 12 weeks, 12 modules per week. With each module, there are 5 homework questions and 5 soul work questions. The soul work is more of that deep work. We will also have 4 guest speakers, including a lawyer who will talk about the current legal landscape. I'll save the other ones for a surprise for those who join. And we'll cover basically everything from start to finish, the essence of a sitter. We'll talk about the wounded healer, which is perhaps a term some of you have heard. We'll talk about assessment and screening and preparation and what to do during the session, and all of it, all the way through to the final module on ethics and legality. Each discussion is about 90 minutes, 30 minutes of the recorded module, and then a 60-minute discussion. And sometimes those discussions go long. You don't have to stay if we go over, but there were a few last cohort that really got into it, and they were a whole lot of fun. Yeah, and we'll also include some, checklists for sitters and reading lists if you'd like, playlists. We have a preparation and integration journal for your clients. It's about 70 pages, so a whole lot of extra goodies in there as well.
Yeah, thanks for that, Sarah. And yeah, I feel like we could have used the whole webinar to talk about how beautiful and amazing and jam-packed with goodies your course is. And really, we had such a successful launch of the training program this year. We've gotten some rave reviews, from our trainees. And yeah, we're just genuinely so excited, and I know it's such a passion of yours, Sarah, to help people really learn more about like what it takes to bring integrity into this space of trip sitting. And we really appreciate all of you who are here with us today, and just your desire, and your eagerness to learn more about what it takes to be an ethical trip sitter.